The email arrived at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, nestled between a spam alert and a reminder about a neighborhood watch meeting. Its subject line was innocuous: something you should know. I almost deleted it, another piece of digital detritus in a world overflowing with noise. But something, a flicker of that quiet anxiety that always hummed beneath the surface of my life, made me click it open. The sender was anonymous, the message brief, brutal, and entirely unbelievable. Your wife, Lydia, is seeing Julian Albright. They meet Tuesdays at the Daily Grind cafe downtown around 4:30 p.m. Julian Albright. The name pinged faintly in my memory. Someone Lydia had mentioned in passing? A colleague? A client? I scrolled through my mental Rolodex, finding no solid connection. And Lydia? My Lydia? Lydia, who meticulously planned our weekend errands, who worried about the perfect shade of paint for the guest room, who kissed me goodbye each morning before I left for my predictable job as a project manager at Sterling and Finch, a firm as solid and unassuming as our suburban town. The idea was ludicrous. We were fine. Not passionately, wildly in love perhaps, not the couple tearing off each other's clothes in movies, but comfortable, stable. We had built a life here in Oakhaven, a quiet, tree-lined haven about 40 minutes outside Boston. Our house, a modest colonial on Maple Street, felt like a fortress of normalcy. I stared at the email, my heart starting a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. It had to be a prank, someone playing a cruel joke. But the specificity of it, the name, the place, the time, lodged itself like a shard of glass. My internal monologue, usually a quiet hum of to-do lists and project timelines, became a frantic, repeating question. Why? Why would anyone send this? Why would they pick Lydia? Why would they pick Julian Albright, whoever he was? I spent the next hour trying to work, staring at spreadsheets that swam before my eyes. The quiet anxiety was no longer a hum. It was a low, insistent thrumming that vibrated in my bones. Could there be even a sliver of truth? Lydia had been different lately. More distant, more preoccupied. I dismissed it as stress from her job in marketing. We all got stressed. This was ridiculous. But the shard of glass twisted. 4:30 p.m. It was 4:05 now. The Daily Grind was downtown, a place we sometimes went on weekends but never during the week. Lydia usually worked late on Tuesdays. She'd said she had a big presentation coming up. My hands trembled slightly as I closed my laptop. Headache, I mumbled to my cubicle wall. I grabbed my jacket. The drive downtown felt surreal, the familiar streets of Oakhaven blurring past. The perfectly manicured lawns, the children playing in parks, the comfortable rhythm of suburban life. It all felt like a facade I was about to punch through. I parked a block away from the Daily Grind, my heart pounding like a drum solo in my chest. I felt absurd, like a character in a bad movie. I was Ethan Sterling, the guy who color-coded his spice rack, not someone lurking across the street from a cafe spying on his wife. I spotted the Daily Grind's awning. Through the large front window I could see tables, people chatting, the usual afternoon coffee crowd. And then I saw her, Lydia, sitting at a small table in the corner, partially obscured by a large potted plant. She was laughing, a bright, easy laugh I hadn't heard from her in weeks. Across from her sat a man, polished, well-dressed, with a confident smile. Julian Albright. My breath hitched. It wasn't just a meeting. His hand was on hers, resting casually on the table. Her fingers were laced through his. The world tilted. The comfortable facade didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. The noise of the street, the distant sound of traffic, the laughter from inside the cafe, it all faded. There was only the image of their joined hands, the intimacy of that simple gesture. I stood frozen, the cold New England air biting at my face, but I didn't feel it. My mind struggled to process what my eyes were seeing. It was real. The anonymous email wasn't a prank. Lydia. My wife. With another man. Julian Albright. I don't know how long I stood there, a statue of suburban shock. Minutes, an eternity. The scene inside the cafe played on, a silent movie of betrayal. They talked, they laughed, they leaned closer. It wasn't a business meeting. It wasn't a casual coffee with a friend. It was something else entirely. Something that ripped the carefully constructed fabric of my life to shreds. A wave of nausea washed over me. I turned away, stumbling slightly, needing to get away from that window, from that sight. I walked aimlessly for a few blocks, the bustling downtown area feeling alien and hostile. Every happy couple I saw seemed to mock me. Every shared glance, every touch felt like a confirmation of what I had lost. My phone rang. It was Caleb. My older brother, my anchor in the sometimes choppy waters of life, even though he was the one who usually sailed closer to the edge. "Hey, E," he said, his voice easy, familiar. "You sound weird. Everything okay?" "Everything okay?" The question felt like a cosmic joke. "No," I managed, my voice tight, unfamiliar. "Nothing's okay, Cal." There was a pause. Caleb knew me. He knew this wasn't my usual low-grade work stress. "Whoa, what happened? What's wrong?" I couldn't say it, not over the phone, not here on the street corner with the world rushing past. Can you meet me, tonight, at O'Malley's?" O'Malley's was a dimly lit, no-frills bar on the edge of town, our default meeting spot when things were serious or just needed a few beers and a chance to vent about work. "Yeah, of course. Give me an hour?" "Yeah, an hour." I drove home on autopilot. The house on Maple Street looked the same, solid and unassuming, but the feeling was gone. It was just a building now, a shell that held the remains of a life I thought I had. Lydia wasn't home yet. Her car wasn't in the driveway. She was probably still downtown, maybe still with him. I went inside. The silence of the house was deafening. Every object, every photograph felt like a lie. The picture on the mantelpiece of our wedding day, a smiling, hopeful couple. The comfortable sofa where we watched movies. The kitchen table where we ate dinner and talked about our days. All tainted. I sat down on the edge of the sofa, the anonymous email still burned into my mind. Julian Albright. The daily grind. 4:30 p.m. and Lydia, her laugh. Their hands. It replayed like a broken record. An hour later I was at O'Malley's. Caleb was already there, nursing a beer. He looked concerned, his usual easygoing demeanour replaced by a furrowed brow. "All right, E, spill it. You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Much worse," I told him. I started with the email, the disbelief, the drive downtown, the lurking outside the cafe. I described seeing them, their hands linked, her laugh. I didn't spare the details, the raw, ugly truth of it. Caleb listened, his eyes wide, his beer forgotten. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, the silence hung heavy between us. "Ethan," he said finally, his voice soft. "Oh man, Ethan, I'm so sorry." I just nodded, unable to speak, the lump in my throat too big. He reached across the table, placing his hand on my arm. "Are you sure? I mean, could it be a misunderstanding? A client? A friend?" I shook my head. "Their hands, Cal, the way they were looking at each other, it wasn't business, it wasn't friendship." I closed my eyes for a second, the image flashing behind my eyelids. It was intimate. He squeezed my arm. Okay, I believe you." He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "God, Lydia, I never would have thought." "Me neither," I whispered. "That's the worst part. I never, ever suspected." We sat in silence for a while, the clinking of glasses and low murmur of conversation around us, a distant soundtrack to my internal collapse. Caleb ordered us both another beer. "You know," Caleb said after a long pause, swirling his beer, "things haven't been exactly great with Marcus either." This surprised me. Caleb and Marcus. Their relationship was louder than mine and Lydia's, full of more arguments and more passionate make-ups, but I thought they were solid. Marcus, with her bright, sometimes brash personality, was the opposite of my quiet Lydia. They lived in a newer development across town, all sleek lines and modern finishes, a contrast to our older, more settled neighbourhood. "What do you mean?" I asked. "She's been distant, preoccupied," he said, mirroring my own earlier thoughts about Lydia. "And she's been spending a crazy amount of time at that community centre gym, like hours every day." "Gym?" "Yeah, says she's working with a trainer. This guy, Brick, says he's really pushing her, getting her in shape." Caleb frowned. "But it's more than that. She's always talking about him. How great he is, how much progress she's making. It's weird." A cold knot started to form in my stomach. The anonymous email. It mentioned Julian Albright. But what if the informer knew both? What if the connection wasn't just Julian and Lydia, but something wider? "Did the email say anything else?" Caleb asked, pulling me back to the present. "No, just that about Lydia and Julian at the grind." I paused, thinking. "But how did they know? The person who sent it. How would they know about Lydia and Julian meeting downtown?" Caleb shrugged. "Maybe they saw them, or they know Julian. Or," I said slowly, the knot tightening, "they know someone who knows. Someone who might have mentioned it." I looked at Caleb. Someone who spends a lot of time at a community centre gym. His eyes widened slightly. Marcus? The possibility hung in the air between us, heavy and unsettling. Marcus. Knowing about Lydia and Julian. Spending all that time at the gym with a trainer named Brick. Could it be connected? Was this some kind of twisted suburban infidelity ring? The thought was almost comical, if it weren't so utterly devastating. Why would Marcus know? Caleb asked, his voice low. Why would she tell someone who would then email you? Maybe she didn't tell the emailer directly, I mused, my analytical mind, despite the chaos, trying to piece together the fragments. Maybe she mentioned it to someone else and that person sent the email. Or maybe she mentioned it to him, to Brick, and somehow it got back to me. Caleb ran a hand over his face. This is getting too complicated, E. My head's spinning. Mine too, I admitted. But think about it. If Marcus is spending all that time with this guy, this Brick, is it just training, Cal? He looked away, down at his beer. I don't know. I don't want to know. I didn't want to know about Lydia either, I said softly, but I do now. We sat in silence again, the weight of two potential betrayals pressing down on us. Two brothers, sitting in a bar, discovering their lives were crumbling simultaneously, possibly linked by some unseen thread woven in the mundane spaces of their suburban existence. Okay, Caleb said finally, looking up, his expression grim but resolute. Okay, so let's say Marcus knows about Lydia, and let's say things aren't just training with Brick. He hesitated, the words clearly difficult. Let's say she's doing what Lydia's doing. It was the first time either of us had explicitly said it about Marcus. It made the air crackle with unspoken pain. If she knows about Lydia, I said, picking up the thread of the plan forming in my mind, a desperate, ugly plan born of hurt and a need for truth. Maybe she knows details, maybe she knows why, or how long, or maybe she just knows enough to confirm it. And you want to? What? Ask her? Caleb looked skeptical. No, not directly, I said. She'd never admit it, not if she's also hiding something. But what if you talked to her, like confided in her? Told her things were rough with you, maybe even admitted to some minor past indiscretion yourself, something small, believable. Made it seem like you were looking for advice, for understanding. Caleb stared at me. You want me to lie to my wife to get her to confess to cheating and rat out yours? It's not about getting her to confess to her cheating, I clarified, though it was partly that. It's about getting her to talk about Lydia. If she thinks you're in a similar boat, or you're just confiding in her about your own marital issues, maybe she'll open up about what she knows about Lydia. Maybe she'll even bring up her own situation, thinking you'll be sympathetic. That's messed up, Ethan. Our lives are messed up, Cal, I said, bitterness creeping into my voice. Lydia is meeting another man downtown. Marcus is spending hours with Brick at the gym and somehow knows about it. We need to know the truth. All of it. I leaned forward. Look, I know this is asking a lot, but I can't just confront Lydia based on an anonymous email and what I saw. She'll deny it, she'll twist it, and if Marcus knows, maybe she can give us that, even without meaning to. And maybe, just maybe, in the process you'll get some clarity on what's going on with her and this Brick guy. Caleb was quiet for a long time considering. I watched him, my heart aching for both of us. He was the more outgoing one, the one who navigated social situations with ease. But this kind of emotional manipulation, this kind of raw suspicion, was new territory for him too. Okay, he said finally, taking a deep breath. Okay, I'll do it. But how do we get her to really talk? And how do we make sure we capture it? I'm not exactly subtle. We record it, I said. We need a recording. Something clear. This added another layer of complexity. How do you secretly record your wife talking about her affair and her sister-in-law's affair? I can get a recorder, I said, thinking of small digital voice recorders used for meetings at work. Something tiny. You could hide it. Maybe invite her over to my place. Lydia will be out. It might feel more casual, less confrontational than talking at your place. Over here? Caleb looked around the bar, then back at me. Yeah, maybe. That could work. And less of her stuff around, less likely to get interrupted. Exactly. You tell her you need to talk, something important, brother-to-brother stuff, but maybe you need her perspective too. Invite her over tomorrow afternoon? Lydia has her late Tuesday, but she's usually home by late afternoon on Wednesdays. Tomorrow, Caleb repeated, processing. Okay, I'll figure out how to get her over here. You get the recorder. The plan felt cold, calculated, and utterly necessary. It felt like the only way forward in a world that had suddenly gone sideways. We stayed at O'Malley's for a couple more hours, talking in low voices, the initial shock giving way to a grim determination mixed with profound sadness. We talked about Lydia, about Marcus, about the men involved, about the years we thought we had built. It was raw and painful, but being able to talk to Caleb, to share the weight of it, was the only thing that felt real and solid in that moment. He was hurting just as much as I was, maybe in a slightly different way, but the core wound of betrayal was the same. The next day was a blur of forced normalcy at work. I managed to get a small, high-quality voice recorder from the office supply closet, claiming I needed it for client interviews. It felt dirty, carrying it back to my car. I went home early, the empty house feeling heavier than usual. I checked the recorder, made sure it was charged and working. I practiced placing it discreetly on a bookshelf behind a lamp, anywhere it wouldn't be immediately obvious but would still pick up sound from the living room. Caleb texted me around 3 p.m. She's coming. Be there around 4:15. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment of truth, or at least the moment we started digging for it. I tidied the living room, trying to make it look inviting, normal. I even put out a bottle of wine, thinking it might help loosen tongues. It felt like preparing for a battle in my own home. At 4:10, Caleb arrived. He looked pale, nervous. She's 5 minutes behind me, he said, his voice tight. Okay, I said, trying to sound calm. I showed him the recorder. It's small. I was thinking, maybe behind the plant on the side table? It's got a good mic. He nodded, taking the recorder with a trembling hand. He walked over to the side table, adjusted the large fern, and placed the recorder carefully behind it, pressing the record button. A tiny red light blinked on, almost invisible among the leaves. Okay, it's on, he whispered. We stood there for a moment, listening to the silence of the house, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The doorbell rang. Caleb swallowed hard. Here goes nothing. I nodded, trying to offer a reassuring look I didn't feel. I watched as Caleb walked towards the front door, bracing himself. I retreated slightly, giving them space, but staying within earshot of the living room. Marcus walked in, dressed in workout clothes, carrying a large gym bag. She was taller than Lydia, with bright, restless eyes and a quick smile that didn't quite reach them. Hey, Ethan, she said, glancing my way. Caleb said you guys needed to talk. Hey, Marcus, I managed, forcing a smile. Yeah, just catching up. Caleb wanted to chat about some stuff. Come on in. She nodded, her gaze already on Caleb. What's up, Cal? You sounded serious on the phone. Yeah, well, Caleb began, leading her into the living room. It is, kind of. He gestured to the sofa. Sit down. Want some water? Wine? Wine sounds good, she said, dropping her gym bag by the door. She sat on the sofa, looking at Caleb expectantly. I went to the kitchen to get the wine, my hands shaking slightly. I poured 2 glasses, one for Marcus, one for Caleb, and brought them in. I didn't pour one for myself. I felt too keyed up to drink. So, Marcus prompted, taking a sip of wine. Spill, what's going on? Caleb took a deep breath. He started slowly, talking about feeling stressed, about work pressures, about feeling disconnected from her lately. He steered the conversation towards relationships, towards the difficulties couples face. He was doing okay, laying the groundwork, making it sound like a general marital vent session. Yeah, I get it, Marcus said, nodding. Relationships are hard. You got to put in the work. I mean, look at me, right? All this time at the gym. It's not just about looking good, it's about feeling good. Having something for myself keeps things interesting. Interesting. The word hung in the air. Caleb picked up on it. Interesting how? He asked, trying to sound casual. Marcus gave a small, knowing smile. Just, keeps the spark alive, keeps you feeling desirable. She paused, swirling her wine. Honestly, Cal, a lot of guys they get comfortable, They stop noticing, stop making an effort. This was painful to listen to, even knowing it was part of the plan. Caleb visibly flinched, but he recovered quickly. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I try, but maybe I haven't been enough lately. He shifted gears slightly. It's not just us, though. I've been worried about Ethan and Lydia too. My ears pricked up. This was the crucial part. Marcus's expression shifted from slightly self-absorbed to a flicker of something else. Concern? Curiosity? Ethan and Lydia, she said. Why? They always seemed so solid, quietly happy. That's what I thought too, Caleb said, glancing towards the kitchen where I was ostensibly getting something, but really listening intently. But Ethan's been off, really stressed, and Lydia's been out a lot, late nights. He lowered his voice slightly. He's worried she might be seeing someone. Marcus leaned forward, her eyes suddenly sharp with interest. No way, Lydia! Our Lydia? With someone else? She didn't sound shocked, not really. She sounded intrigued. That's what he thinks, Caleb said, playing his part. He even mentioned he heard something about her meeting some guy downtown. Julian Albright? Marcus laughed, a short, sharp sound. Julian Albright? Oh yeah, Lydia's definitely seeing Julian. My blood ran cold. She said it so casually, like confirming the weather. You know about it? Caleb asked, feigning surprise. Know about it? Marcus chuckled. Cal, everyone who's anyone knows about it. Lydia and Julian, they've been a thing for months. Months. The word hit me like a physical blow, not just a recent lapse. Months. Months. Caleb repeated, his voice betraying a hint of genuine shock now. How do you know? Oh, Lydia tells me things, Marcus said, waving her hand dismissively. We talk, girl stuff. She needed someone to confide in. Julian's apparently quite the catch, very attentive, not like some guys. She shot Caleb a look that made my stomach churn. She confided in you? Caleb pressed, keeping his voice steady. Yeah, she was worried someone would see them, especially downtown. It's risky, right? Meeting in public like that. I told her she should be more careful, find somewhere more discreet. Marcus took another sip of wine. Honestly, I told her she should just get a room somewhere, or better yet, find someone closer to home, like someone at the community centre. Much easier to slip away unnoticed there. Community centre, the gym, brick, the pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. The community centre? Caleb asked, his voice carefully neutral. Why there? Marcus smiled, a knowing, slightly smug smile. Because things happen there, Cal. Things people don't talk about. It's the perfect cover. Everyone's focused on their workout. Trainers have private offices, right? Easy access. No questions asked. She leaned back, looking pleased with herself. I mean, look at me. I'm there hours a day. Who questions it? Oh, Marcus is just dedicated to her fitness. Little do they know. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it in the living room. Little do they know. She was practically confessing. So, you're saying you're seeing someone at the community centre? Caleb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus hesitated for just a second, a flicker of caution in her eyes. Then she seemed to decide Caleb's fake confession had made him a safe confidant. She chuckled. Let's just say. Brick isn't the only reason I'm spending so much time there. He's a very dedicated trainer, if you know what I mean. She laughed again. Honestly, Cal, you should see him. He's built like a brick house, and the things he can do with those muscles. Let's just say he puts the personal in personal trainer. She went on, providing more details, explicit details about her affair with Brick, how it started, how often it happened, the thrill of the risk. It was grotesque. Listening to her talk about it so casually, so boastfully, in my living room, knowing my brother was sitting there, hearing his wife describe her infidelity and his own wife's betrayal in the same breath. She talked about Lydia and Julian again, comparing their affairs, offering unsolicited advice. She seemed to relish the role of the experienced worldly one, advising Caleb on how to handle my supposed suspicions and how to keep his own marriage from getting boring. Lydia's affair? That's old news, she said dismissively at one point. Everyone's moved on to other things. Other things. Like her and Brick. I stayed hidden, listening, my hands clenched into fists. The anger was a hot, burning coal in my gut, but beneath it was a cold, vast emptiness. Months. Everyone knows. Lydia confided in Marcus. Marcus knew and didn't say a word, not to me, not to Caleb, until she thought it served her purpose. Finally, Marcus finished her wine. Well, she said, standing up, thanks for the wine, guys, and Caleb, you really should talk to Lydia, and maybe find your own brick at the gym. It really does wonders. She grabbed her gym bag. Caleb stood looking stunned, heartbroken and furious all at once. Yeah, he managed, his voice flat. Thanks, Marcus. "See ya," she said, giving a little wave, seemingly oblivious to the devastation she had just wrought. She walked out the front door. We waited until we heard her car pull away. Then Caleb turned to me, his face a mask of pain and rage. "She knew," Caleb choked out, his voice trembling. "She knew about Lydia. For months. And she's doing the same thing, with that brick." I walked into the living room, my legs shaky. "Yeah, Cal, she knew." We stood there for a moment, the silence now thick with the weight of the confessions we had just heard. The tiny red light on the recorder, hidden behind the fern, blinked steadily. It held the truth, the ugly, painful, undeniable truth. Caleb sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. I sat down beside him, putting an arm around his shoulders. We didn't say anything for a long time. We just sat there, two brothers whose lives had just been irrevocably shattered by the women they had married, the women who were supposed to be their partners, their safe harbor. The raw pain in the room was almost unbearable. It was worse than seeing Lydia at the cafe. This was confirmation. This was the full scope of the deception. Not just one betrayal, but two, intertwined, known and hidden by someone within our own family circle. Finally, Caleb looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Months, Ethan, Lydia, and Marcus." She talked about it like it was nothing, like it was some kind of game. "I know," I said, my voice hoarse. I heard her. What do we do now?" he asked, sounding lost. "We listen to the tape," I said, my voice firm. "We listen to all of it, and then we figure out what's next." We rewound the recorder slightly and played it back. Hearing Marcus's voice, casual and confident, describing her affair and Lydia's, was somehow even more sickening than hearing it live. Every detail, every boast, every dismissive comment about fidelity felt like a fresh wound. We listened to the whole conversation. It was all there. Marcus confirming Lydia and Julian's affair, the timeline, months, her knowledge, her lack of concern, and then her own explicit confession about Brick, the community centre, the details of their encounters. When the recording ended, we sat in silence again. The truth, captured on a tiny digital device, was overwhelming. "She has no idea we recorded her," Caleb said, a grim realization dawning on him. "No," I confirmed. "She thinks she was just having a casual chat, confiding in you." "So, this is proof," Caleb said, looking at the recorder. "Proof for both of them." "Yeah, it is." We have to leave them," Caleb said, stating the obvious, but saying it out loud made it real. "We can't stay. Not after this." "No," I agreed. "We can't." The decision, though painful, felt surprisingly clear. There was no coming back from this. The trust was obliterated. "I'm calling Evelyn Reed," I said, standing up. "Ben gave me her number. He said she's the best divorce lawyer in the area. Sharp. Doesn't mess around." Caleb nodded numbly. "Okay." I went to my study, found Ben's contact info, and dialed Evelyn Reed's office number. It was after hours, but I left a message, a brief, urgent summary of needing to discuss divorce proceedings and having evidence of infidelity. That night was one of the longest of my life. Lydia came home later, acting normal. I couldn't look her in the eye for too long. Every word she spoke, every casual touch, felt like a performance. I went through the motions, ate a little dinner, watched some TV, but my mind was racing, replaying the recording, planning, grieving the life I was losing. I couldn't sleep in the same bed as her. I mumbled something about stress and needing space and went to the guest room. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down. The next morning, I was up before dawn. I packed a bag quickly, just the essentials. I wrote Lydia a note. It was difficult. How do you summarize the end of 7 years of marriage, 10 years together, based on a betrayal you just confirmed? I kept it brief, cold, because anything else felt like a lie. I told her I knew about Julian, that I had proof, that I was leaving and starting divorce proceedings. I told her she could contact my lawyer to arrange getting her things. I didn't mention Marcus or Brick. Not yet. I left the note on the kitchen counter, grabbed my bag and walked out of the house on Maple Street. The air was crisp and cold, the sky just starting to lighten. It felt like walking into a new, terrifying world. I drove straight to Caleb's apartment. I knew he'd be up. He opened the door, looking as rough as I felt. "You did it," he said, seeing my bag. "Yeah," I said. "I did it." He stepped aside, letting me in. His apartment was less homey than my house, more minimalist, reflecting his less settled nature. I wrote Marcus a note too, he said, closing the door. Left it on the dresser, told her I knew about Brick and that I was leaving. We looked at each other, two brothers, newly separated, standing in the quiet apartment, the weight of their broken marriages heavy on their shoulders. Coffee? Caleb offered. Yeah, please. We sat at his small kitchen table, drinking coffee, talking in hushed tones. We replayed parts of the recording from memory, trying to make sense of the senseless. Marcus's casualness, Lydia's months-long deception, the sheer scale of it. I told him about the lawyer, Evelyn Reed. I have a meeting with her this morning. You should call her too, Cal. Our cases are connected. It makes sense for the same lawyer to handle them. Caleb nodded. Yeah, okay. My meeting with Evelyn Reed was sobering and strangely empowering. Her office was sleek, modern, high up in a downtown office building, a stark contrast to Oakhaven. She was exactly as Ben described, sharp, direct, with an intensity in her eyes that promised competence. I laid it all out for her, the anonymous tip, seeing Lydia, the plan to record Marcus, the contents of the tape confirming both affairs and Marcus's knowledge, involvement in Lydia's. I played her key parts of the recording. She listened intently, her expression unreadable. When the segments finished, she leaned back in her chair. Okay, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice calm and measured. This is compelling and complicated. Complicated, I asked. The recording, she explained. Its admissibility in court can be tricky. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for recordings. Meaning, generally, you need both people to know they're being recorded for it to be legal evidence. My heart sank. So, it's useless? Not necessarily useless, she corrected. It's likely inadmissible as direct evidence against Lydia, as she didn't know she was being recorded. However, Marcus did know she was talking to Caleb, and while she didn't know she was being recorded, her statements about her own affair might be admissible against her. And her statements about Lydia's affair are hearsay, but they provide powerful leverage in settlement negotiations. When her lawyer hears this, they'll know fighting is likely futile. It forces their hand. She paused. And your brother's case against Marcus is much stronger with her explicit confession on tape. She has no real defense there. What about Julian and Brick? I asked. They're peripheral, she said. Unless you wanted to pursue a civil suit against them for alienation of affection, which is rare and often difficult. The primary action is the divorce against your wives. And the community centre? I asked, remembering Marcus's comments. If the affair happened there, is there any liability? Evelyn steepled her fingers. Possibly, but it's a long shot for a significant payout like you sometimes hear about. You'd have to prove negligence, that they knew or should have known this was happening and failed to act. It's not impossible, especially if there were other incidents or complaints about this Brick character, but it's far from guaranteed. The recording might help establish a pattern of behaviour, but it's not a smoking gun for the centre's liability. It wasn't the massive payout the original story had, but Evelyn's analysis felt grounded in reality. The leverage from the tape in forcing a settlement was the key. So, she concluded, we proceed with divorces for both you and your brother. We use the tape as leverage. We aim for a swift, uncontested settlement based on the infidelity, preserving assets as much as possible, and we explore the community centre angle, but don't rely on it for a major financial outcome. Okay, I said, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that there was a path forward, dread at the difficult road ahead. I'll start drafting the papers immediately, Evelyn said. Have your brother call me. We'll need to discuss finances, assets, all the practical details. It won't be easy, emotionally or practically, but we'll get through it. Leaving her office, I felt a little lighter, having handed the legal burden over to a professional. But the emotional burden remained, heavy and suffocating. Caleb called Evelyn later that day and scheduled his own meeting. We spent the next few days in a blur of practicalities, gathering financial documents, finding temporary living arrangements. I stayed with Caleb, avoiding contact with Lydia and Marcus. Lydia tried to call and text initially. Her messages were a mix of confusion, denial, and hurt. I didn't respond. Evelyn advised minimal contact, all communication through her office. It felt brutal, cutting off someone I had shared my life with for a decade, but necessary. Any contact felt like reopening the wound. Marcus was less remorseful, according to Caleb. She was angry, defensive, accusing Caleb of spying and betrayal. The tape, however, silenced her protests quickly once Evelyn shared it with her lawyer. The legal process moved forward, a cold, clinical counterpoint to the emotional turmoil we were experiencing. Evelyn was relentless, navigating the predictable legal maneuvers from the other side. Caleb and I leaned on each other. We talked constantly, rehashing the betrayals, expressing our anger, our sadness, our confusion. We shared moments of dark humor about the absurdity of our situation. Two brothers, simultaneously divorced because their wives couldn't resist a polished charmer and a muscled trainer. We started going to the community center gym ourselves, not for training, but for a different kind of catharsis. It felt like reclaiming the space, stripping away the sordid associations Marcus had attached to it. We worked out, pushing ourselves, channeling the frustration and pain into physical exertion. We even saw Brick once. He was indeed built like his namesake, but he avoided eye contact, shrinking away when he saw Caleb. It was a small, petty victory, but it felt good. The community center angle didn't yield a huge lawsuit as in the original story, but Evelyn used the potential for negative publicity. A trainer having affairs with married women on premises, to add pressure during Marcus's settlement talks. The community center angle didn't yield a huge lawsuit as in the original story, but Evelyn used the potential for negative publicity, a trainer having affairs with married women on premises, to add pressure during Marcus's bassoon. It resulted in a slightly more favorable financial outcome for Caleb than might have been expected, but nothing life-changing. The real value of the tape was the undeniable proof it provided, forcing swift settlements in both cases. Caleb's divorce was finalized first. I went with him to Evelyn's office to sign the papers. Marcus had already signed. Caleb looked pale and drawn, but there was a quiet dignity about him. He signed the documents that legally ended his marriage, the marriage he had rushed into, the wife he had idolized. He shook Evelyn's hand, thanked her, and then went to the restroom. I stood outside the door for a few minutes, hearing the muffled sounds of his grief. It was a raw, painful moment, the sound of a heart breaking. 3 weeks later, it was my turn. My divorce from Lydia was set to be finalized. Lydia and her lawyer had agreed to the settlement terms Evelyn had negotiated, largely thanks to the leverage the recording provided, but Lydia had one condition. She wanted to meet with me privately before the papers were signed. Evelyn was cautious. "You don't have to do this, Ethan. It won't change the legal outcome." "I know," I said, "but I think I need to. Not for her. For me. I needed to see her, to hear her, to put a final, definitive period on the end of our story, not just a legal one." The meeting was arranged for a conference room in Evelyn's office. I arrived first. The room was impersonal. A table, chairs, a box of tissues on a side table. It felt like a stage set for a difficult conversation. Lydia arrived with her lawyer, who waited outside. When she walked in, my breath caught in my throat. She looked thinner, paler, but she was still Lydia. She wore a simple dress I didn't recognize. Her eyes, those familiar eyes I had loved for so long, were filled with a mixture of sadness and apprehension. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Lydia," I replied, my voice neutral. I gestured to a chair across the table. "Have a seat." She sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The silence stretched, filled with unspoken history and pain. "You wanted to talk," I prompted gently. She nodded, looking down at her hands. "Yes, I wanted to say, I'm so sorry, Ethan." The words hung in the air. Sorry. It was a start, but it felt inadequate, a band-aid on a gaping wound. "Sorry for what, Lydia?" I asked, maybe a little too sharply. "For the affair? For lying? For doing it for months? For letting Marcus know and letting her keep it a secret?" She flinched at Marcus's name. For all of it," she whispered. "I messed up. Terribly. I wasn't thinking. It just happened." "Just happened?" I repeated, the anger starting to simmer beneath the surface. "For months, meeting downtown? That doesn't just happen, Lydia. That's a choice. A series of choices." Tears welled up in her eyes. I know it was wrong. I hate myself for hurting you. You were always so good to me, Ethan. So stable, so kind." "Stable? Kind?" I scoffed softly. "Was that the problem? Was I too boring?" "No, it wasn't that," she said, her voice rising slightly. "It wasn't about you, Ethan. It was something in me. I felt, I don't know, invisible, like I was just going through the motions. Julian. He just made me feel seen, exciting, for a little while. Exciting, seen. The words felt like nails in my heart. All the years of quiet devotion, of building a life together, of finding comfort and security in our shared routine, it wasn't enough. She needed excitement. She needed to be seen by a man who wasn't her husband. And was it worth it, Lydia? I asked, my voice low and raw. Was that feeling of being seen by him worth destroying everything we had? Worth shattering my trust, my heart, our life? She started to cry openly now, tears streaming down her face. No, she sobbed. No, it wasn't. It was stupid, a terrible mistake. I regret it more than anything. Do you? I asked, my gaze steady. Do you really? Or do you just regret getting caught? No, I regret doing it, she insisted. I miss you, Ethan. I miss us. The house, the life. I miss you. Can't we try? Can't we fix this? The question hung in the air, heavy with the impossible. Fix this? Fix a foundation that had been pulverized? Fix a trust that had been systematically dismantled over months? I leaned forward, my voice quiet but firm. Lydia, listen to me. When you marry someone, you make vows, promises. You build something together, brick by brick, and the mortar that holds it all together is trust. Absolute, unwavering trust. I paused, searching for the right words, the words that conveyed the depth of the damage. You didn't just have an affair, Lydia. You took a sledgehammer to that foundation. You didn't just break the trust, you annihilated it. You made a mockery of our vows, of our life together. I looked her in the eye. How could I ever look at you again, touch you again, share a bed with you again, and not wonder? Not wonder where you were, who you were with, what you were thinking. How could I ever feel safe, knowing that the person I trusted most in the world was capable of such sustained deception? She had no answer, just tears. Trust, I continued, my voice thick with emotion, isn't like a broken vase you can glue back together. Maybe you can stick the pieces back, but the cracks are always there, always visible, always a reminder of where it's shattered. I stood up, walking to the window, looking out at the downtown streets, the people going about their lives, unaware of the quiet devastation unfolding in this room. I loved you, Lydia, I said, my voice barely audible. I loved you more than anything. I thought we were forever, growing old together in that quiet house on Maple Street. That was my future, and you took it away. I turned back to her. She was still crying, her face buried in her hands. I can't fix this, Lydia, I said. I can't unsee what I saw. I can't unhear what I know. I can't rebuild on a foundation of dust and lies. I walked back to the table and picked up my pen. The papers are ready. Let's just sign them. She looked up, her eyes pleading. Please, Ethan, one more chance. I'll do anything. Anything to make it right. You can't make it right, Lydia, I said, my voice gentle now but final. Some things can't be made right. They can only be ended. I signed the papers. My signature felt heavy, marking the official end of a decade of my life. She signed hers, her hand visibly shaking. Goodbye, Lydia, I said, picking up my copy of the papers. She didn't look up. She just continued to cry softly. I walked out of the conference room, leaving her there. Evelyn Reed was waiting for me in the hallway. She looked at me, her sharp eyes softened with something that might have been sympathy. Are you okay, Ethan? She asked. No, I said, my voice flat, but I will be. The days and weeks that followed were a strange mix of numbness and sharp bursts of pain. The house on Maple Street was sold. Assets were divided according to the settlement agreements Evelyn had negotiated. It was all handled efficiently, clinically. The physical ties were severed, but the emotional ties, the memories, the phantom limb ache of a life that was supposed to be, those remained. Caleb was my lifeline. We spent most evenings together, either at his apartment or mine. I found a small, impersonal apartment downtown needing a change from the suburbs. We cooked simple meals, watched movies, or just sat and talked. We talked about everything and nothing. We talked about Lydia and Marcus, trying to understand, giving up on understanding. We talked about the future, a future that suddenly felt vast and uncertain. We need to get out of here for a bit, Caleb said one evening, swirling the ice in his drink. Get away from all this. He gestured vaguely, encompassing the apartment, the town, the lingering ghosts of our marriages. Where? I asked. Road trip, he said. Just us. No plans, really. Just drive. See some stuff, maybe hit a national park, do some hiking, something completely different. It sounded good, necessary, a deliberate act of putting distance between ourselves and the wreckage. We planned it quickly. A 2-week road trip out west, aiming for places like Zion or Bryce Canyon. National parks felt safe, solid, ancient, a contrast to the fragile, broken structures of our recent lives. The road trip was exactly what we needed. Days were spent driving through vast landscapes, hiking through stunning canyons, breathing air that felt clean and new. Evenings were spent in cheap motels, talking for hours, or sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence, watching bad cable TV. We talked about the betrayals, the pain, the anger. But we also talked about other things. Our childhood, our dreams before marriage, who we wanted to be now. We laughed, sometimes until our sides ached, finding humour in the darkest corners of our shared experience. Caleb, with his more outgoing nature, started easing back into himself, his charm resurfacing. I, the more reserved one, found myself opening up in ways I hadn't before, the shared trauma having stripped away some of my usual reticence. We met people on the road, other travellers, friendly locals. Caleb, naturally, was better at striking up conversations. He'd often pull me into them, introducing me as his brother, recently divorced, looking for a fresh start. It felt awkward at first, being labelled by my failed marriage, but there was also a strange freedom in it. We met Chloe in a diner in rural Utah. She was travelling alone, taking a break from her job as a freelance graphic designer. She had an easy smile and eyes that seemed to see more than she let on. Caleb, in classic Caleb fashion, struck up a conversation, and soon we were all talking, sharing stories of the road, carefully skirting the edges of our personal histories. Later that evening, we ended up at the same small motel. Caleb, ever the wingman, somehow orchestrated it so that Chloe and I ended up talking alone on the porch outside our rooms. We talked for hours under a sky thick with stars, a sky unlike anything I'd ever seen back home. I found myself telling her more than I intended, hinting at the recent upheaval in my life, the unexpected end of my marriage. She listened without judgment, sharing snippets of her own life, her own challenges. There was a connection, a quiet, tentative connection built on shared vulnerability under a vast, indifferent sky. We didn't talk about betrayal or pain directly, but it was there, a silent understanding. That night, we ended up in my room. It wasn't the passionate, forget-your-troubles encounter that Caleb might have had. It was hesitant, gentle, marked by a quiet sadness that lingered around the edges. It wasn't about sex as a distraction. It felt like two bruised souls finding a moment of solace in each other's company. It wasn't lovemaking in the way I had known it with Lydia, but it was connection. Human connection. Afterwards, lying in the dark with Chloe breathing softly beside me, thoughts of Lydia, of Julian, of the broken trust still flickered. But for the first time, they didn't consume me. They were there, but so was the quiet presence of someone new, someone kind who had listened. Chloe left the next morning, continuing her journey east. We exchanged numbers, a promise of staying in touch that we both knew might or might not happen. It didn't matter. The 4 days we spent together, talking, hiking, sharing that quiet night, had been a small, unexpected gift, a moment of genuine connection in the midst of healing. It showed me that connection was still possible, even after everything. Caleb, ever the pragmatist, nudged me back into the present after Chloe left. Okay, E, she was great, really nice, but she's gone. We've still got a week left of this trip. Let's keep moving. And we did. We hiked more, saw more incredible landscapes. We met other people, had more conversations, some superficial, some a little deeper. I didn't seek out another connection like the one with Chloe, but I was more open to them. I was less guarded, less defined by the betrayal. The road trip ended. We drove back to Massachusetts, changed, a little tanner, a little less raw. The scars were still there, but they felt less like open wounds and more like scars. Evidence of a battle fought and survived. Life settled into a new rhythm. My small downtown apartment felt more like home now. Caleb and I still saw each other regularly, our bond forged in shared pain and recovery stronger than ever. We were two single men, navigating the complexities of dating after divorce, of rebuilding trust, of figuring out who we were outside of our failed marriages. 8 months passed, 8 months of therapy sessions, of awkward first dates, of moments of loneliness, and moments of unexpected joy. 8 months of healing, sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back. One Saturday night, Caleb and I decided to check out a new steakhouse in a town not far from Oakhaven. It was a lively place, a band playing, people dancing. We were sitting at our table, waiting for our food, talking about Caleb's latest dating misadventure, when he suddenly went quiet, his eyes fixed on something across the room. Ethan, he said, his voice low. Don't look right away. But she's here. My heart gave a familiar, unwelcome lurch. She. There was only one she that could elicit that reaction. Lydia. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the sudden surge of adrenaline and nausea. Okay, I said, my voice steady. Is she? Yeah, Caleb confirmed. With a guy. They just sat down. I waited a few seconds, forcing myself to appear casual, then turned slowly to look across the room towards the section Caleb was looking at. And there she was, Lydia, sitting at a table with a man I didn't recognize. She looked different. Her hair was styled differently. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen. She looked good, healthy even, and she was already looking at me. Our eyes met across the crowded restaurant. For a moment, the noise, the music, the people, all faded away. It was just us. The history, the pain, the love, the betrayal, it was all there in that silent exchange across the room. I managed a small, non-committal smile, a slight nod. She smiled back, a hesitant, sad smile. I forced myself to turn back to Caleb. Okay, saw her. You okay? He asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Yeah, I lied, or maybe it wasn't entirely a lie, just surprised. Didn't expect to see her here. Want to leave? No, I said firmly. We're here for dinner. We're staying. Just, let's not talk about it. Don't tell me what she's doing, who she's with. I don't want to know. Caleb nodded, understanding. He launched back into his story about the awkward date, his voice deliberately loud, creating a shield of normalcy around us. I listened, I laughed, I ate my steak. But a part of my awareness remained tethered to the table across the room, to the woman who had been my wife. Later, as we were finishing coffee, the band started playing a slow song. Couples drifted onto the small dance floor. I watched them, a familiar ache in my chest. Then, a hand on my shoulder, I turned. It was Lydia, standing beside our table, looking hesitant but determined. Ethan, she said, her voice soft. I stood up. Lydia. Would you dance with me? She asked, gesturing towards the dance floor. For old time's sake? I hesitated for only a second. Part of me screamed no, run, get away. But another part, the part that still held the ghosts of 10 years, felt a strange pull. I looked at Caleb, who gave me a subtle, supportive nod. Okay, I said. Okay, Lydia. We walked onto the dance floor, joining the other couples. She came into my arms, familiar and yet utterly changed. The warmth of her, the scent of her perfume, it all brought back a flood of memories, happy ones, painful ones. We danced slowly, awkwardly at first. We made small talk, the mundane conversations people have when they don't know what else to say. How's work? How are you settling in? The weather. But as the song continued, the small talk faded. We just danced, two strangers moving together, haunted by the intimacy they once shared. I looked at her face, the face I had loved, the face that had lied to me. The pain was still there, a dull throb, but it was mixed with something else now, a strange sense of detachment, of looking back at a life that belonged to someone else. She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. Are you okay, Ethan? She asked, her voice quiet. I could have lied. I could have said I was great, moved on, happy, but looking at her, seeing the raw regret in her eyes, I decided to be honest, or at least my version of it. I'm all right, I said slowly. Pretty good, I guess. Some days are better than others. I paused. Seeing you tonight, dancing, it's powerful. I didn't know I'd feel this much. Her lip trembled. I'm not all right, Ethan, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. I miss you, every day. Being in your arms again, it's... She trailed off, unable to finish. We danced the last few steps in silence. When the music ended, we lingered for a moment, neither of us wanting to break the fragile bubble we had created. Ethan, she said, not letting go immediately, have you ever wondered if you made the right decision? The question surprised me. Right decision? Leaving? Divorcing her? No, I said honestly. I haven't wondered if I made the right decision to leave. That felt necessary. The only decision. Oh, she looked down. I've wondered about other things, I admitted, about how we got there, about why, about how someone you loved so much could do that. She looked up again, her eyes filled with regret. I think about us all the time, she said, but usually... Usually I don't get much past wondering why you made the wrong decision. Wrong decision? Leaving her was the wrong decision. The sheer disconnect was staggering. She still didn't understand. She still saw it through the lens of her loss, not the lens of my betrayal. "Lydia," I said gently, pulling away, ending the dance, ending the moment. There was no wrong decision in leaving. The wrong decision was the one that broke the trust beyond repair. Her face crumpled. I knew there was nothing more to say. "Goodbye, Lydia," I said, stepping back. She nodded, tears streaming down her face again. She didn't try to stop me this time. I walked back to the table. Caleb looked at me, his expression questioning. "You okay?" he asked again. "Yeah," I said, sitting down. "Yeah, I'm okay. Just a lot to process." "She still doesn't get it, does she?" he said quietly, having clearly overheard some of the conversation. "No," I confirmed. "She doesn't." We finished our drinks. The encounter with Lydia had been painful, a reminder of the past, but it also felt like a confirmation. Confirmation that I had made the necessary choice. Confirmation that the fundamental gap in understanding, the chasm created by the betrayal, was still there. Later that night, back in my apartment, I lay in bed. The silence felt different than it used to. Not empty, but quiet. A space for reflection, not just pain. The scar was still there. It always would be. But it no longer defined me. I was Ethan Sterling, survivor, brother, a man slowly, tentatively building a new life on a foundation of hard-won truth and the unbreakable bond of family. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I wasn't walking it alone. The next morning, the sun streamed into my apartment. It was a Saturday. Caleb and I had our usual tennis game planned at the public courts near his place. Getting back into routines, simple, predictable routines, had been a crucial part of the recovery process. I made coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me. My mind drifted back to the night before, seeing Lydia, the dance, her words. Why you made the wrong decision. It still stung, that inability, or perhaps unwillingness, to see the reality of her actions from my perspective. But the sting wasn't as sharp as it would have been months ago. It was more like a dull ache, a reminder of what was lost, but less of a consuming pain. Caleb arrived around 9 a.m., dressed in his tennis gear. He looked rested, his usual easygoing self fully returned. We didn't talk about Lydia immediately. We talked about the weather, about our plans for the weekend, about how badly I was going to lose to him on the court. On the drive to the courts, the conversation naturally circled back. "So," Caleb said, glancing at me, "last night, seeing Lydia." "Yeah," I replied. It was weird, surreal. "Did it mess you up?" he asked, sounding genuinely concerned. "For a bit," I admitted. Seeing her, being that close, it brought it all back, the memories, the pain. I paused, but then, talking to her, hearing her say what she said, it also reminded me why I left, why there was no other option. "Yeah," Caleb said quietly. "She really doesn't get it, does she? Still thinks she's the wronged one, or that you just overreacted?" "Something like that," I agreed. "It's like she understands she did something wrong, but she doesn't understand the impact, the irreversible damage to trust." "Some people can't, I guess," Caleb mused. "They can only see their own side, their own pain, or their own needs." He said the last word with a hint of bitterness, thinking of Marcus and her brick, and her need to feel desirable. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe they just don't want to face the full weight of what they did." We pulled into the parking lot of the tennis courts. The familiar thwack of balls on rackets filled the air. It was a simple physical sound, a welcome contrast to the complex emotional landscape we had been navigating. We played for an hour, pushing each other, laughing at our bad shots, celebrating the good ones. The physical exertion, the focus required, was a form of therapy. On the court there was only the ball, the net, the game. The rest of the world, the betrayals, the divorces, faded into the background. After the game, sweaty and tired, we sat on a bench, catching our breath. The conversation turned, as it often did, to the future. Dating, building new relationships. "It's tough, man," Caleb said, wiping his face with a towel. "Putting yourself out there, trusting someone again. How do you even start?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Slowly, I guess. Tentatively." I thought of Chloe, that brief, unexpected connection in the middle of nowhere. It hadn't led anywhere long-term, but it had shown me that a flicker of connection was still possible, that not everyone was deceitful. "That girl you met on the trip," Caleb said, as if reading my mind. "Chloe, She seemed nice. Did you guys keep in touch? A little, I said. Texts here and there, but she lives out west. It's hard. Yeah. Long distance is tough, even when things are easy, he said. But it's good you met her, E. Showed you that there are good people out there. Not everyone is like. He trailed off, not needing to name them. No, I agreed. Not everyone. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching other games, feeling the warmth of the sun. Remember that money from the community centre thing? Caleb asked suddenly. Yeah, I said. It wasn't a life-changing amount, but it had helped cover some of the initial expenses and gave me a small cushion. We should do something with it, he said. Something for us. Not just bills and lawyers. Like what? I don't know, he shrugged. Invest it? Or maybe do another trip. Not a recovery trip this time. Just a trip, something fun. The idea appealed to me. A trip, not to escape pain, but to embrace possibility. A trip funded, ironically, by the fallout of one of the betrayals, repurposed into something positive. Maybe, I said, a small smile forming. We'll figure it out. We got up, gathered our gear. As we walked towards the parking lot, I felt a sense of quiet strength. The past was a part of me. The scars were real, but they weren't the whole story. My story was still being written. And for now, the next chapter involved getting lunch with my brother, talking about anything and everything, and facing the future, whatever it held, together. The bond with Caleb. That was the unexpected gift from the wreckage. The one relationship that hadn't shattered, but had instead been tempered and strengthened in the fire of shared trauma. We had started this journey as two husbands, blindsided by betrayal. We were ending this phase as two brothers, scarred but standing, ready to face whatever came next together. That, more than anything else, felt like a victory. Life continued. The sharp edges of the pain began to soften further, replaced by the dull ache of memory and the quiet resilience of moving forward. Caleb and I found our rhythm as single men.